Good morning to all. I see a lot of familiar faces, and including my friend Auguste Komi, the World Line Country Head. My own team, Abhishek is here, Ramesh, and the ISA team. And in particular, I'd like to recognize the significant contribution by Ajay Mathur for the ISA. He and his team were actually nurturing ISA like a baby from inception and making it really a global institution. Today's topic is extremely important, and I was reflecting on thoughts as to what is this international alliances doing at a time when we are talking about multilateral engagements. How significant are these international institutions? We all know that as international institutions, what is common to all of us is making reports, country papers, technology, research, monitoring, mobilizing, capacity building. These are very much common in our minds when we talk about international institutions. But these are very, very important. But I think of late, there is a movement towards even greater action. And I think, we need to reflect on what is possible in the days ahead for these unique international organizations in this age of complexities and challenges ahead of us. Beyond the policy advocacy, I think there is one thing that's common to all of us as a humanity. Working towards a sustainable, climate resilient future is a common goal, objective of humanity. It's nothing new. I think we are very familiar with this idea and the objectives. But as we go towards that goal and objective, it's also important for us to understand the narratives. Because for a very long time, the global narratives are set by the West. It's very clear. And we understand these concepts of climate change challenges, development, many other things from the prism of the Western, how the West views these things. And they are so conditioned to think that this is very natural. And that's where I believe the international organizations, alliances, should bring more focus to the narrative setting and the correction that is needed in this narration. We are conditioned to think that energy and growth are so interlinked, and they're so important, and they're so intrinsic. That's very much true. But energy and development are also intrinsically linked. That doesn't get the focus that it deserves. While growth is important, development is also very important. So energy interlinked with development is what needs to be brought into focus. And I tell you why this is so important. As countries are beginning to redesign their own policies for energy transitions, there will be a lot of stress, in particularly democracies. People will become restive, and the governments become restless because you have to deliver for what they promise. So it's a governance challenge for them to deliver to the people. So what comes so naturally is you sacrifice long-term objectives for short-term goals. And it's what happens all the time. So many countries have net zero targets, more or less settling at 2050. India has a 2070. So what it means, I think we have to put this in the context of what challenges it means for the world and humanity as such. So the target is 1.5% rise in temperatures, limiting it to pre-industrial levels, and what it means. I think the numbers you all are familiar with, which is you have to bring down the CO2 emissions, reduce it by 6% by 2030, and more than 50% by 2050. And huge gigatons of carbon dioxide reduction. So numbers are staggering. And in terms of actual costs, it would mean $150 trillion by 2050, which again translates per annum up to $5 trillion of spending required for renewables. But if you look at the energy matrix, which is also changing dynamically, with more renewables coming into that matrix, you are also beginning to see that countries having to spend a lot more money than they have at their disposal to do the transition. So no matter what we do, today we are at about significantly over 18% in the energy matrix, the contribution of the renewables energies in the whole matrix of the energy production. So which means that the world will continue to depend on fossil fuels, while at the same time trying to make a shift to renewables. So there will be a challenge, and how do you balance these two? So increasingly, the funds will not be going for fossil fuels. Many international funding agencies and international banks have said no. So a lot of focus will be on the renewables, both solar, wind, hydrogen, green hydrogen, hydro, electricity capacities. So lending will diminish. So we always understand the narrative of the energy from the point of view, the climate change challenge, from the point of view of emission caps, the NDCs, the Paris deal that countries have adhered to require emission caps. But this is a very simplistic understanding of it. But behind that is the kind of commitments that countries have to make. Even if countries make the commitments, put the funds together, still not be able to achieve the targets that we have set for, unless and until you bring mission life into the context of these climate change challenge. So that's where, again, the consumption patterns have to be come into the focus when you're talking about climate change. Now, the energy transition challenges are difficult for every country, including the developed and the developing world. But the reality is, the global south, of which the developing countries, a large number that it constitutes, will be hurt even more. Even more. And as I said, the long-term goal sacrifice for a short-term gain. So that's what eventually all democracies will tend to go in the direction. So it is not so easy. For us, it's something that's very easy to preach, but for governments to implement these goals of energy transition, it's not going to be easy. So what can international alliances do to help countries in the global south make the energy transition a little bit more enduring and manageable? So a few ideas I thought I should share. One of which is go beyond the normal activity that we do, which is advocacy, working on monitoring, making good reports. Can you forge enduring projects, collaborations on a commercially viable basis? I think that's number one that the international alliances can do. Blended financing. Can you get blended financing arrangements into these projects that entrepreneurs and businesses can undertake? Now, it's not easy until why will an entrepreneur go to Africa if he doesn't find it viable, commercially enduring for it? So that's where, again, because there is a risk element, that's where the World Bank MEGA will come in, risk mitigation aspects. So that's where, again, the alliances can focus on bringing in blended financing and also bringing in the risk mitigation instruments. Regulatory frameworks. Many in the global south are still struggling with a regulatory framework that is focused on the energy and climate change balancing aspects. It has not been achieved. So most of the countries, irrespective of what they are, where they tend to copycat a model that's coming out from the West. So can institutions like the ISA, IRENA, and others, can they work towards helping in the regulatory framework? And there's one more thing. It's not necessarily at the national level. That's one important point. But also cross-border trading of energy in the renewable space. Can we work on that? Why is this important? Because in the global south, the energy requirement may not be huge. So if any commercially viable enterprise or activity has to be installed in the global south, it has to have, logically, ability to sell energy across borders. So cross-border energy sale, is that possible? And that's, again, I feel very important where the alliances can work on. The SDG 7 clearly says that affordable and clean energy access. That's an important goal and a very laudable goal. But we are not close anywhere near that. 6 years left for achieving the SDG goals. And the world is so much behind in the targets, in the realization of those goals. But what is important is we can take few steps that will make a big difference in the waste management, waste to energy, where women, can they be involved in that? Because they are the ones who are most affected by it. Rural waste, urban waste, where women are intimately linked to the household consumptions, can they be involved? And that's even more dynamic. If you can look at the possibility of women being involved both in the energy production and in the energy consumption. That's where I bring to focus the women-led development. It's eminently doable, but we need to think out of the box to make this happen. The last item I want to focus on is research. Because even today, when I'm looking at energy transition, the fossil fuels will still be a dominant producer of energy. You can't wish it away. But somewhere there can be a game changer. And I believe it depends on technology, research. So alliances, if they are working with research institutions, the startups who are looking at the pioneering aspects of research, where it can be a game changer. We are looking at more advanced materials that can produce energy at a much greater efficiency levels. A lot of research is already ongoing. Can alliances work with them to ensure that that research actually takes the center stage in the commercial space and in the global south? A few thoughts I'll leave for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Can we have another round of applause for Mr. Damo, please? Sir, we request you to kindly take a seat. Ladies and gentlemen, as a part of the panel, I'll be now inviting our moderator, Sarah Jacob, journalist and former anchor. Can we hear it for her? Joining us for the discussion will be our panelist, Dr. Ajay Mathur, sir, Director General, International Solar Alliance, ISA. Alpana Saha, Director Partnership, Governance and Resource Mobilization, CDRI. Gauri Singh, Deputy Director General, International Renewable Energy Agency. Thank you, ma'am. And SP Yadav, International Big Cat Alliance. Well, Mr. Ravi has already talked about how we are just looking at the world and following in their footsteps rather than creating something of our own. I think the discussion will continue with our moderator taking this forward on the topic United for Change, International Alliances Driving Global Action. Over to you.
Good morning, hello, welcome everyone to day 2 of the International Solar Summit. It's a fabulous start to this morning. Our AQI is down for one, so thank you all for making it here despite the rain. Now, thank you first and foremost to Mr. Ravi for setting the stage here and being so succinctly putting forward the need for international alliances to solve the world's global pressing issues. We have, as they've all just been introduced, we have a very erudite, a very distinguished panel, very experienced panel here. So let me quickly get to them. These are persons who are navigating this bold new world, a world of multilateral alliances. So let's quickly get to them and learn from their experiences. Firstly, Mr. Mathur, thank you so much for hosting these 2 days of scintillating, intellectual, stimulating panels that we've all been lucky enough to participate in. Now the ISA, it's a one-of-a-kind multilateral organization. It has been established to catalyze the use of solar energy globally, especially by the developing world. Launched in 2015 at COP21 by the Prime Minister of India and France at the Paris Climate Summit. Mr. Mathur, I want to ask you, India has historically long avoided these global alliances. Yet, here we are today, India is a case study when it comes to being a nation that has leveraged these partnerships, working partnerships, to arrive at our own strategic goals and needs. Could you take us through this strategic shift and whether you think that these multilateral partnerships have allowed India to achieve what we required as opposed to these conventional, traditional alliances?
So Sarah, I am a little uncomfortable with the question that India has avoided multilateral relationships. We actually haven't. Whether it is the old organizations like the World Bank and Augusta, we've been a founding member, or if it is more recent organizations like the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, we're very much partner there. Not only a partner, we actively participate in it. However, the problem that occurred was, as Damu just said, that we faced a situation in which there was a particular narrative, and therefore multilateral institutions were unable to address it. So I think all of us here are focused on sectoral goods. In my case, solar energy. In Gauri's case, all renewable energy, including solar. In Dr. Yadav's case, big cats. In Alpana's case, disaster resilient infrastructure. The key issue here is that we have not been able to, for example, capture the fact that there is not just one world, but to my way of reading it, and the Solar Alliance brought out a report last year, this year we'll bring out another one, we are not looking at one, but 4 different realities. We are looking at the developed countries where the demand for energy per capita is not increasing. We are looking at the developing countries where it's increasing. So you'll ask me, why should I put up solar energy during the day when the sun is shining and fossil fuel capacity for the time when it is not? In the developed countries, that fossil fuel capacity is the capacity which is already there. But here where the demand is growing, you're adding. This is the problem. Then you have the third group of countries, also developing countries, but smaller developing countries, which are net takers of technology, of finance, etc. And then you have the small island developing states. If you have to go from one small island developing state to another, how do you go? By boat. Is anybody talking of electric boats? My point is that's completely out of the conversation. That is why you need specific sectoral organizations to address these issues. Round the clock, real time electricity price is something only which is important to us. The developed world can do without it. That is why we need the ISAs.
So sectoral alliances. Let me start by then asking all of our speakers, Mr. Ravi, perhaps first you already touched upon this. Sectoral alliances, why are they so important? And you touched upon the role of the Global South in this, and then we move on.
So I think the time has come for us to be more specific in the way we address the global challenges, because in a multilateral setting, it's more of talk, discourse, discussion, and is lost in the din of the entire the discussion that goes on in the halls. But I think if you have to then come back to distilling those agendas into actionable programs, then you need multilateral alliances like this, which is then focusing specifically on certain sectors. For example, it's the disaster resilience, CDRI, the ISA, solar, so on and so forth. So it's very important. At the same time, as I said, when you are talking about very focused approach through these alliances, then you have to bring in the Global South issues, because otherwise, who will talk for the Global South? We have to bring to the forefront the Global South challenges. So you have a lot of green funds, you have a lot of pension funds, you have loss and damage funds, but don't know how to use it. But unless and until you have a specific body that are looking into it, examining these issues, making them available, the narration is building up, then solutions to be found. It can come only through bodies like this. Thank you.
Mr. Yadav, the Big Cat Alliance is, in a sense, the baby of all of these alliances, because it's the youngest. It was just started as a few months ago, February or March. So take us through a little bit of why the need for the Big Cat Alliances, and according to you, why do you think these sectoral alliances are important first?
Sarah, you're right. We are the kid in the block. We are the youngest alliance created by the Government of India. In fact, this International Big Cat Alliance has been created or established for the saving 7 big cats, like tiger, lion, leopard, snow leopard, cheetah, jaguar, and puma. Out of 7, these 5 big cats are found in India. We, as everyone is aware, we are the largest tiger-range country in the world. More than 70% wild tiger population is India. We are the only home to Asiatic lion, which is in Gir, and the population is doing very well. We are one of the largest leopard range country in the world. Similarly, on snow leopards, we are doing very well. We lost cheetah from our country. Last cheetah was shot or seen in 1947, December. In 1952, the Government of India declared it as extinct, and it took us 75 years to bring back cheetah. We are the first country having done this wild-to-wild intercontinental translocation of any big cat like cheetah. So there are a lot of good practices which we can share with the world. There are, in fact, the World Bank supported and started Global Tiger Initiative for tiger conservation. In the first summit, which took place in 2010 at St. Petersburg, all 13 range countries came together and they committed to double the tiger number by 2022. India already did that, and Nepal has done that, and tiger population is doing good in some countries like India, Nepal, Bhutan, and Russia. But in all other countries, it is either decreasing, declining, and some countries even lost all their tigers in recent times, like Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, PDR. If you see the African lion population, it's again rapidly declining. If you see the cheetah population in the world, it's again rapidly declining. Jaguar is also facing problem. Puma is somewhat stable. And if you see this all big cats, they cover more than 50 million square kilometer of habitat. If we save this big cats, you are saving the entire ecosystem and the biodiversity and the ecosystem service because of it. Take example of tiger conservation in India. We have 55 tiger reserves in the country and more than 350 water streams, sweet water streams. Either they originate from tiger reserves or they have their large catchment in tiger reserves. So for water security of the country, for ecological security of the country, we need to preserve all these big cats. And therefore, these alliances are very, very important because you need not reinvent the methodology of habitat conservation or introduction or monitoring. And this, we can share our best practices. India has a lot to share with other countries that how we have done it.
So as you point out, 75% of the world's tigers, Mr. Yadav, are in India, right? And you talk about sharing best practices. India's role as a contributor to tiger conservation, as a leader, is globally recognized. So some would say, in a sense, when it comes to the Big Cat Alliance, India doesn't stand to gain as much or learn as much as compared to other partners in this alliance. So in that context, if you could do alliances like this also, they're a platform and a way for India to be a global leader, to show that we have the foresight to make these connections, like you just pointed out, and to do what doesn't come naturally or doesn't come easily, but needs to be done.
Sarah, as Damu said, the role of Global South. Now on tiger conservation, lion conservation, leopard conservation, that means we are the people, we are the global leaders, and we can share. As I said, African lion population is declining, jaguar population is declining, cheetah population is rapidly declining. So with our experience of big cat conservation, in tiger, lion and leopard and snow leopard, we can share our best practices with the countries which are facing problems. With 1.4 billion population, we are the largest tiger-rich country. There's something amazing and very difficult to believe by the Western countries. So, human-wildlife conflict, we can in fact share our practices that how this large population of human can live with big cats in harmony. And similarly, technology. We do this tiger assessment on scientific basis. And once in a 4 year we come out with numbers, absolutely robust scientific methodology. Many countries in the world, they have not been able to do this. So we can share about this, like patrolling practices, like MS Stripes, smart patrolling and all, which we are doing successfully. We can help other countries to reverse the trend of declining population. So lot to share good practices with other countries. And another important thing is, many landscapes we share boundaries, like India, Nepal, India, Bhutan, India, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. If poaching is rampant in our neighboring country, the tigers cannot survive in our country. So therefore, the alliance is very, very important, and India being leader or champion in conservation of big cats has to play an important role so that all countries they can successfully reverse the trend of declining population.
This message of how interconnected the world is, Gauri Singh, COVID-19 brought home that message faster than anyone else, that the world is interconnected, that you do need global cooperation, coordination in order to handle pressing issues. There can perhaps be nothing more pressing than reducing the use of fossil fuels. But as Mr. Mathur points out, the Western idea of how the developing world or the global South should reduce its dependence on fossil fuels is very different from what our requirements are. Take us through first the challenges IRENA faces in this.
Thanks, Sarah, and great to be here, and thank you for having me here. I think the whole the alliances, or at least let me speak about how IRENA came to be, was in a framework where you didn't want a very heavy governance structure, but you wanted technical assistance that's practical and has meaning to the membership, which comprises of countries. So I think the framework that most of these alliances which we see happening recently are very different from those heavy bureaucracies that we saw in the last century and the way they came up. Because the whole culture that's pretty much encouraged by the member countries that become part of this is more like a startup culture. So you have to be agile, you have to be on your feet, you have to think about what the membership wants to be able to respond, and that's pretty much what brings the relevance of these alliances continuing. And I think it's in that framework, if we talk about energy transition, and if we talk about renewable energy, when IRENA got set up in 2011, it was renewable energy was a very exotic way of providing electricity. Some of the rich countries had the money to provide feed-in tariffs, and which is why you saw solar moving, you had some wind happening. But the role that most of these alliances have to play in their early formational years is to be able to get the knowledge out on the various aspects of whichever sector they're dealing with. In the case of IRENA, of course, it was about costing, of what's happening to the costing, what's happening on technologies, innovations, research and development. But very soon, what you see is, because these are platforms for countries to come and talk about their own achievements in that sector, so very soon these become very powerful setups to encourage and force these alliances and the secretariat within those alliances to do even more, which is to go the furthest step and start looking at the issues on the ground and how these alliances can actually be the anchoring to make those issues actually get resolved. So I'll give you a very quick example of an issue that we faced during COVID. It came up, and we had to respond by coming together with a financing coalition, or let me call it a financing partnership alliance, to look at the huge amount of investment that is needed in the countries in Global South, and not one particular entity having the wherewithal to manage the complexities of the financing world. So you needed an organization that had skills in reinsurance. You needed an entity that came in to say that they could bring in the equity support. There were financing institutions that came in to say we can bring in the debt that is needed, the softer debt that is needed, commercial debt that is needed. And because the complexity of the problem of energy transition on the ground is so huge, because it's not just happening on the energy field now. It's a paradigm shift to an economy-wide transition that you're seeing on the ground. So these kind of responses for the problems on the ground are very much needed, because you don't bring the scale and you don't bring the knowledge with that scale. And I think the big role that these alliances, these agencies, sectoral agencies do is to be able to anchor it, so that you can go to a country or a set of countries in a region and actually bring in responses that are adequate to a level, but not suboptimal if you had to do it alone.
Let's bring in Alpana. Ms. Alpana, the CDRI was launched in 2019 by Prime Minister Modi, I think, at the UN Climate Action Summit in New York. In a nutshell, CDRI works to ensure that infrastructure is built that can withstand natural disasters. I think the gist would be, as long as you do intelligent technology that takes in mind or takes into consideration local issues, climate change, etc., natural phenomena don't have to become natural disasters. Take us a little through a bit into the challenges that CDRI faces, and also in the context, as Ms. Ravi touched upon in his opening statements, about the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, because the clock is ticking there.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. So as you rightly said, I mean, the genesis of the CDRI, when it was conceived and established, actually lies in the fact that there are multiple global agendas which were set. And one of them, which is very related to it, is the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. One of the targets which is looking at the infrastructure, and infrastructure cut across both economic development, social development, and so on and so forth. It was realized that many countries are far behind, and there are multiple complex issues which relates to it. Now, that is where a need was felt that a coalition is to be developed, which sort of look into those critical aspects of how to make the infrastructure resilient. Now, besides looking at the building the infrastructure which the countries are doing, I think the most intangible, invisible part of the infrastructure development are the codes, the standards, the issues which really impact. So how your infrastructure, and we all know that most of the infrastructure is still to be built for over the next 20 years. So how, we look into the building of those new infrastructure which are resilient, which means that you have to start looking into the codes, building codes, standards which really ensure that your infrastructure is safeguarded, irrespective of any natural hazards or any climate change that can impact. So increasingly we are all seeing the impacts of the climate change on resulting into the increasing disaster or the frequency or the intensity of those disasters impacting. So I think the whole genesis was that how we help work with the countries, to make them understand what their risks are. Many of them are still unaware about those risks. So how we can help bring common understanding about the infrastructure risks, then risk to the disaster, risk to the climate change, and then make a sort of assess where they stand at this stage. And then work towards, with those assessment, with those frameworks, and how they can plan for future, how they make their investments sound. So I think if you look into the current stage, many of the countries are still far behind. And last year during the Sendai Framework midterm review, it became very clear and evident that we are lagging behind. And thus, infrastructure being a central to many SDGs, particularly the 9, 13, so and so forth. So I think there is a huge need for an coalition like CTRI to take that lead, to bring knowledge, to bring solutions. And again, I mean, there are multiple solutions in the global south which can be shared among each other. And also, infrastructure is common to all, like developed or developing or small islands. The need, the requirement, the challenges are very different. But I think in each instance, we have to work and have customized solutions to address to those challenges.
Customized solutions, local solutions.
Local solutions which are relevant to it. So which means that you have to work really with the communities, local governments, local systems, local stakeholders to come out with the solutions which are relevant to them. And to that initiative, what we are doing, and I'm just quoting an example here, is an initiative again launched a few years back by 6 prime ministers. We call this Infrastructure for Resilient Island States, IRIS. The whole conception of this initiative is co-curation, co-design by the small islands themselves. So they sort of come forward, they identified their needs, and then together CTRI with the other coalition members co-designed this initiative, which is now providing them the technical assistance and knowledge to help build their infrastructure resilient. So, and we are seeing increasing interest coming from the small islands towards this.
All right, can we now also just touch a little bit on challenges? For example, CDRI, I think, has some 40 members, am I correct? If you can just, ISA would have how many? 119. Missing a lot. So is there a tipping point when it's like becomes too much of a good idea? We're talking about localized answers, localized solutions, collaborations, partnerships. When does it become, is there a problem of being too big in scale? Is there a problem of a cap on the power of collaboration? Can you take us through some of the challenges perhaps that each of you have faced in your own sectoral alliances?
So the quick answer is yes, there is a challenge, but the challenge is much more of our capacity. And the way we have done this is to use master trainers to train trainers who then localize the content. So you're absolutely right. As Alpana said, you need to provide local inputs. The question is, how do you get enough people? So, colleagues are here. One of the ways that we are doing this is through something called the STAR initiative, which was pushed by our co-president France, and their STAR stands for Solar Technology and Applications Resource Centers. These are in-country centers. You may train the trainers here in India, but then they go about doing large-scale training in their own countries, design what that country wants. So if a country wants to do solar mini-grids, there's no point in doing training for large-scale solar there. Number two, we want these to be sustainable. So we work with the countries to see, for example, initially provide them with the equipment that they need for testing of the PV. And then the country requires that all PV things that are imported are tested through. That gives them an income stream. We also ensure that they are located in a capacity building institution, a university, rather than creating new brick and mortar facilities. So those are the ways in which we kind of meet the growing challenges. The challenge is, don't become big yourself, make others become big.
Very, very well put. Mr. Ravi, where do you see the challenges lying?
Well, thank you, Sarah. Let me bring a broad picture first. I think India is really a test case on the achievement of the SDGs because of the numbers that we have. I'm sure my friends from the World Bank fully understand what I mean by that. See, when you show improvement on the numbers in India, it immediately shows a jump in the way the SDGs are fulfilled, in the objectives that are fulfilled. So, and what India does in terms of achieving those objectives, the low-cost solutions that we have successfully implemented in India, can be replicated and customized to the global south countries. And I'm not saying, we don't need the West. We definitely need the West too. But let's say, for example, the rooftop solar, which is a very Indian way of solving the energy localized requirement and in local. So that is taking development to the local level. There is an immense possibility of doing such, replicating those models outside of India in the global south. It's possible. So is the case in the resilient infrastructure. There are lots of low-cost solutions which can be replicated in that part of the world. And I believe what India can do and the lead that we are taking, it is time that India provides solutions and we take it to the global south. But it's not just India is finding solutions. We need also the developed West in the game because the technology is there, the finances are there. We have to work with the West. So there is a north-south paradigm that's built into the development, and India can take the role. And the international solar alliances, as the number increases, which is a good thing, because we are trying to get even the developed world into our alliances so that they become more sensitive. There's more sharing of the technology, sharing of the resources to finding problems of the global south. Thank you.
If I can add, and I'm putting words in your mouth, I'm hoping that the new alliances become the focus of triangular cooperation, north, south, south.
You described these alliances as a startup culture in a sense, a lot of energy, flexibility. Where do you see the challenges when then maybe you are replicating these alliances that we've had globally in the West before?
You're absolutely right about the scale of, sometimes these platforms become so popular that the numbers of countries become very big. You don't want to become a UN entity because that's the last place you want to go. That's not a path for at least these modern alliances to go. But definitely, I think, having that kind of a membership at a platform, speaking about their own achievements, helps in shaping the larger global narrative and bringing the voices of the global south very clearly into that narrative. Had it been, had energy transition only been something that the Western developed countries were talking about, you probably would not have gotten elements of the just energy transition, because then it would only be about replacing coal with renewable energy, but the whole shaping of how the world should be looking at energy transition, which in fact is now accepted that it's not one energy transition but multiple pathways that each country will move on. So it's energy transitions. So the nuancing, the shaping of the global narrative at platforms like this, it becomes really a very important way for countries to think through their own national strategies and work on it. The other thing I think which is pretty much specific as to the trends of what is happening on the energy transition. So we are going to be in a much more electrified world. What that means is that, and Mr. Ravi touched on it, is that the regional cooperation and partnerships will become much more important. And because the cross-border flows of electricity will start becoming much more needed and relevant, whether you like it or not. You might not like your neighbor, but these are, this is how the way the energy transition will move. The other thing is that energy transition as we see it now is not the centralized, state-owned, companies-driven kind of a transition. This is much more driven by the private sector, which again means that just one country, and of course India is a complete exception, but any one country will not have the kind of market that it will be able to attract the kind of investments that private sector wants to come in. So the whole way that the energy transition will move will be actually fostering much deeper regional cooperation and partnerships. And I think that's pretty much a way that, at least at IRENA, we are seeing that to work with these regional bodies and to be able to support them, to bring that kind of a stronger partnership on energy transition in regions is probably the way forward, and it's also a way to respond to the very many large numbers of countries that are now members.
Well, I'm being told to keep my eye on the clock. I know all of you have busy schedules, but before we let you go, could you, we have ISA, for example, which has now got 10 years under its belt. On the other hand, you have the Big Cat Alliance, which is 3 months, like you said, the new kid on the block. If I can just start with you, Mr. Mathur, 30 seconds, the next 10 years. What do you see? What would you like to see?
I think, in a sense, Mr. Ravi set the agenda. What I'd like to see is us enabling cross-border trade in energy and electricity in particular, number one. Number two, like it or not, much of the innovation that is occurring as far as devices are concerned is occurring, which will go in the developing world, is occurring in the developing world. So, for example, the kind of solarization of health facilities you see in the Northeast are more or less, with changes, are the ones that are being adopted in other countries as well. So, I think we need to be able to find ways to work with these new innovators. So, to me, this research and cross-border trade will be the goal of the future.
Mr. Ravi?
Thank you, sir. I think I'd like to emphasize that the alliances as they become important, I think they should go beyond advocacy, beyond capacity building, while they keep doing it. But I think what's important is take the commercial angle, encourage private sector to come into the space of energy generation, renewable energy generation. So it should be more of a PPP model, as I see, public-private partnerships at the local level. It need not be big projects. Solutions can be at the local level. As I said, rooftop, there's urban waste, the waste to energy concept, the biodigester concept. These are local solutions and easily doable. I think that's what the alliances should be focusing, so that you have multiple sources in which energy is generated, and that at the local level is finding solutions. Thank you.
Mr. Yadav, where do you see the Big Cat Alliance in 10 years?
Right. There are 95 range countries, and within the last 4 months, 23 have already consented to become member of International Big Cat Alliance, and by end of 10 years, I'm expecting that most of the range countries will be part of this. And as far as big cat conservation is concerned, I'm expecting, I will see that the trend of declining, trend and population declining will be reversed, and that's the ultimate objective. And we'll get biodiversity conservation and ecosystem benefits out of it, and people understand the importance of big cat conservation. Thank you.
Ms. Singh?
I think, we have a very strong political momentum around energy transition, and I think the way renewables is growing at 14% year on year, and if it grows to about 16%, we should reach the tripling of renewables that all the political leadership have committed to by 2030, and which means that technology is available. There is also the willingness of countries to go in that direction. But I think for alliances, they will continuously need to not get, get comfortable in their own comfort zones. Because if that happens, then you just lose relevance. And I think the challenges that at least we're seeing coming in the next few years will be about how do you move renewables to the end use sectors like mobility, like transportation, like getting buildings, whether heating or cooling, and industrialization. And also when you talk about these, then again the challenges are very different in the different parts of the world. So to be, being mindful of it, being able to get the best practices around it, and also move this very large part of final energy consumers into the renewable space, which I think is something that looks to me as a challenge that we would be addressing.
So I think the next 10 years for CTRI, we certainly would like to see that we have more members joining from the Africa and the Southeast Asia. They are vulnerable, they are facing different challenges, so we really want to see the increased membership in these regions. And I think the other critical component that we would really like, we are working towards and would like to see in the next 10 years is how the agenda of disaster resilient infrastructure embed and integrate in the national government's policy framework. And it becomes in the practice of the private sector and the other public sector which are building the infrastructure. So I think these two would be the critical that we would like to see in the next 10 years.
All right, and clearly a very ambitious agenda, but I think we all agree we owe it to the future generations of India that we make sure we succeed in achieving this. Thank you all for your time, taking our time today and speaking with all of us. Thank you. Well, we're told that we have some time for some audience questions. You are not likely to get a panel like this, so go ahead. I see a gentleman there. Does he have a mic? Yeah, you get your mic.
Let's go for audience questions. Okay.
The gentleman in the front row right there. You can start here. Should we take
We'll get the mic in the audience, and can I please request anyone who asks a question, if they can please introduce themselves, and of course, the moderator takes it forward.
Joshua Vaidyath, COO from ISA. I would like to think I'm an environmentalist from my background. I'm a former Secretary of Environment. I just wanted to know, in solar, we take policies across borders. Not all would just click, matching fit into that country's policy or framework, so you have to tweak it. When it comes to protection, conservation, you were mentioning about how these alliances can be of support to other countries who do not have similar protection. So NBSAP from one country to another country is different normally. So would you have any advice towards how your team would like to go, or these alliances could go where it doesn't fit? Because different if you take poaching, for example, poaching has become very sophisticated. You now have syndicates sitting in on protection seminars and protection conferences to listen in on your strategies as to how they can overcome. So different geographies have different issues. So how can alliances then support cross borders when it comes to different issues?
Joshua, very, very good question. In fact, the problems most of the developing countries are facing is more or less common, like human-wildlife conflict, as poaching you cited, and then habitat degradation, habitat fragmentation, reduction in the habitat, community issues. These all are site-specific, but the broad principles of conservation can be same. The pillars, there is problem of resources, most of the countries. Why all these problems are taking place? Equitable distribution of the benefits of ecosystem services. Therefore, what we need to do is that broad principles will be the same. However, there will be country-specific planning, like SWOT analysis of every country, the strength, opportunities, threats, and weaknesses. And based on that, the gap has to be identified, whether it is resources, capacity, skill, technology, and all. And based on that, we need to address this. So this will be the strategy.
So Big Cats would have that capacity in build? Okay, thank you.
I'm Arvinder Singh Brara, Chairman and Managing Director of Mantech Consultants. My question is that with these international alliances, how do you involve the common man through these alliances? These alliances are normally organization to organization, but the ultimate objective is for action to trickle down and get the citizens involved. So how do you envisage or see involving the people through these alliances?
Rasa, where you are, this festival is just a way of reaching out to us as people, not as experts. Yes, of course, all of our alliances have government members. And therefore, in the formal meetings, we reach out to countries and their governments. But all of us also reach out to people through projects that we do. Projects are very, very people and developer specific. We reach out through through festivals like this. We are, for example, here we are looking at women, we are looking at youth, we are looking at community, we are looking at the private sector. So I think every alliance will have a different way, but you need to, you're absolutely right, you need to add the goal of reaching out to people apart from reaching out to governments.
If I just can add one quick word, in a humble attempt to do what I just said, I have a website called www.greenpledges.com, which encourages people to do various activities to protect the environment and reduce climate change. It covers solar, it covers others. So I just wanted this forum to be aware of that this is an individual effort, but at a global scale.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I'm Surinder Oberoi, and a journalist, and also work sometimes as a consultant to humanitarian international organizations. My question is simple, maybe for ISA or CDRI. I understand that these organizations are quite young at the present area, but can I have some examples of a role model or a model which you have created and has been accepted by the West or any third country?
Go ahead first, or okay.
So I think as I was mentioning earlier, one of the example which has been a strategic initiative, we call that IRIS, is truly an example which is being accepted by the developed nations in a sense that they have made their financial contribution to support this initiative. The acceptance from the islands itself and the other countries in the process is through the provision of resources, tools, technical experts, and the islands themselves, who are very much part of this initiative. A, in the designing, B, engaged in the governance process of that initiative, And third, this initiative, the way it is gaining momentum and recognition. So very recently, in like a couple of months back, it was recognized as, it received the SIDS Partnership Award by UN under the environment category. So while it is something accepted, adopted by the islands, but it is also having a global recognition by the developed nations and others. So it's truly an example of what you asked for. Dr. Mathur, over to you.
I'll very, very quickly answer. I won't go into the Global Solar Facility, which seeks to develop a payment guarantee mechanism. That's the next session. But look at identifying startups. The SolarX program that we did has very strong backing from all our member countries, including financial backing, because that's how you figure out who's participating. And that is about identifying solar startups. Last year we did it in Africa. This year we're doing it in Asia Pacific. Next year we do it in Latin America.
Yeah, my name is Sudhir Kapoor and I've been involved in solar for many, many years. I think Jay knows that. And our approach is, our worry is that as we start moving and adding more and more solar, the fact that solar has a problem in being able to supply post-sunlight hours, right? And we are relying on batteries. And how far can that go? So if you look, we are still also planning to put up new coal-fired plants in this country. My question here is that there are technologies today like solar thermal, which allow, and there are 24/7 solar thermal plants around the world, where what you're doing is you're using solar to heat up oil, and you can store that oil and run that through a normal conventional power plant when that happens. Enough is not happening in our country. We are doing a small project right now in NTPC Dadri, where we are actually doing augmentation. So what we are doing is we are replacing coal to some extent, a pilot project, the first of its kind in India. But I think if we don't start thinking very seriously about solutions on storage, I think, and keep relying on batteries, I think that's not going to take us where we need to. I want your thoughts on that, sir.
Well, as far as quick thoughts are concerned, you're absolutely right. We're not there yet as far as the technology which will provide cheaper than fossil fuel round-the-clock electricity. Therefore, each country will have to find its own solution. So, for example, if you look at the North European countries, they use the Norwegian hydro storage as a means to provide electricity round the clock, which is green. Whether it will be solar thermal or whether it will be batteries or both, the point is the jury is still out. We need to make sure that all of these are tested out, we find out the costs associated with it, and move on quickly.
Hello, excuse me, good morning to you. My name is Dr. Om Prakash Gupta. I'm a global advisor in mining and metals, particularly critical minerals and strategic minerals field. My question is, when I actually, at some place I was reading that whatever the solar parks and solar energy we are producing in India, there are not enough buyers. I mean, not enough PPA agreements have been signed, between the producers and the buyers. So there is some sort of, the confusion going on. Will you clarify on this, please? Thank you.
Very, very quick answer. The challenge really is round-the-clock electricity, which is something that we in India have been pushing. You need electricity during the day, but you also need electricity when the sun is not shining. The major problem that has occurred in signing power purchase agreements is when you do not have adequate backup power. But as Mr. Kapoor just mentioned, or I talked of the 4 tenders that have happened, which are looking at round-the-clock electricity, being competitive with or cheaper than fossil fuel electricity. We, I think, are figuring out the way ahead. Please note the time. It is hardly 10 years in which we are already talking of competitiveness. 10 years ago, we were talking of 25 rupees, 17 rupees, 12 rupees a kilowatt hour. So We have moved very, very fast. This is also an issue which will be resolved in a matter of years, not decades.
This young lady here, just last question. Go ahead.
Hi, I am Nandini. I work for the embassy.
Can you get a mic somewhere?
I'll get you a mic. You can use mine. And can you just point it up? Yes.
Hello, I'm Nandini. I work as the policy advisor at the Embassy of Costa Rica in London. I've just moved back to India and I am actually working on a paper with the government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And so this is regarding the paper as well as just a normal question as well. I know that it's regarding sustainable energy, so I'll just go ahead with the question. So recently it was demanded by most of the countries at the IMO meeting that the GHG emissions are phased out by 2050. To achieve the target of net zero emissions as was provided in the Paris Agreement, yet we hear concerns from India about achieving those targets. When do you think we will be ready to address this challenge? Thank you very much.
I think the key issue is when can we find round the clock, and I emphasize round the clock, renewable electricity that is competitive. I think we are almost there. We have individual projects, we need to take it to a population level.
Thank you all. We've just kick-started the day. We have many more very stimulating discussions with very interesting panelists. So let's move on to the rest of the day. But thank you for now.
Thank you very much. May we have a huge round of applause for everyone on the stage, please. Thank you very much, Sarah, for drawing the conversation, bringing out the essence of United for Change, International Alliances driving global action. Well, after that picture, I will also request Dr. Mathur if you can kindly present a memento to everyone on the dais, please. Thank you, sir. And everyone in the audience, if you can kindly put your hands together for everyone who's here with us. Once again, thank you to everyone on stage.